down go the holier than thous.
That's right.
Steps up and delivers a 50-50 ball. What a catch by Olave.
Husky reports that he is on his way to the Milwaukee Bucks.
He's not getting his happy ending this time.
Okay, today is Tuesday, December 5th. Justin, just me and you today. Zach can't make it, unfortunately. He'll be back on Thursday. A little bit of a scheduling hiccup. Just going to be me and you today. Going to break down football. Going to have on Carlos Medina from Atlanta. He sports reporter, sports radio for Atlanta. Going to break down the Georgia Bulldogs being taken out of the college football playoffs. Hottest team the whole year, and then all of a sudden, after one weekend, out of the college football playoffs. Break it all down with him, maybe even get into some of the pro sports in Atlanta as well. But recurring guest, had him on last time. Awesome interview, awesome talk, just like last time. But we'll get to him in about 30 minutes. First, I do want to we will break down NFL like we always do. Closest game, most intriguing storyline, all that we always do, and every other game that happened on Sunday. But we have to talk about the rest of the college football rankings. Obviously, we'll touch base with Georgia at length with Carlos coming on in a second here. But let's break down the rankings that came out for the playoffs this past Sunday. Michigan, number 1, Washington, number 2, Texas, number 3, and then Alabama, number 4. First thing we have to talk about, Florida State is out of the college football playoffs. Big controversy, as we all know. Many people are saying it's obviously a big controversy. Team should be in the FSU should be in the college football playoffs. I actually don't think they should be. I'm actually okay with them being left out, but it's also very controversial. And Justin, to start us off, I do want to hear what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on FSU being taken out of the playoffs? Do you think it's right? Do you think are you kind of in line with the mindset of the best team should make it, or do you think that they have showed enough on the field that they should be one of the 4 teams going into the end of December here?
I think that the record matters. I think the 13-0 record matters for Florida State, but should they have been in this Final Four playoffs? No, I don't think they should have been. I think that that it looks like that win against Louisville was not the best win. Obviously, whoever had the best win makes it. But I kind of think I kind of differ. I think that they should be in. Part of me thinks that, but a part of me says no, they didn't win enough, so put Alabama in. But they could have got that They could have got that 4th spot instead of Bama, but they didn't. So I could see. I mean, this is why next year is going to be much better with extra teams being added. I mean, if they did it this year, Florida State would definitely be in that college football playoff with the extra teams added.
Yep. No, my takeaway on it is I do think if FSU was in like the SEC or even the Big Ten, I think they would get they could have the same resume, the same circumstances with Jordan Travis being out on their 3rd string quarterback, and I do think FSU would actually make it if they were in a better conference. But it's just a further indication that the ACC might be done in the future. I mean, despite the playoffs being increased to 12 teams, I mean, schools like FSU, Clemson, Notre Dame, if you want to count them in that. I know they're not technically part of the ACC, but they have no incentive to stay if they're not going to be respected by the playoff committee. And now we have all these QBs entering the transfer portal. It's going to be more competitive as ever. And yeah, teams are just not going to have much incentives to stay in the ACC if the playoff committee is not ultimately going to respect them and give them the respect that they need. Let's break down the other teams, though. Michigan, number 1, honestly, no. I mean, there's no debate
surprise
there. Michigan should be number 1. Despite this, despite the scandals, despite the sign stealing scandals, offense has been a little flattering as of late, but the defense, of course, has been absolutely insane for Michigan, and they took care of business against Iowa, won the Big Ten championship, and handled a lot of other teams throughout this year as well. Washington, number 2. I don't think they're the best team in college football right now. I still think Oregon actually is better than Washington. I think Washington did end up beating Oregon twice, which is great. But I don't actually know if Washington is number 2, deserving of number 2. What do you think about, Justin, what do you think about Washington being number 2? Do you think they actually are the second best team in the country?
I think they are. I think that they got the right win against Oregon. This is why the college football playoffs setup is tough to understand, and it's so tough because you have Florida State that they basically part of me thinks that they should have been in instead of Alabama or instead of Washington. Maybe Washington goes down to 4, and then Florida State, and then Texas. Texas, I could see Texas at number 2 instead of Washington. Maybe Washington slides down to number 3 or 4.
Yeah, no, and I'm just shocked about Alabama making it. People were saying after week 3, 4, first month of the year, how Alabama was done. I think we were saying it on this podcast. Alabama was washed. Nick Saban, what might be done in Alabama, the team not nearly as good. Dynasty is over. Yet Alabama ends up at the end of the year finishing off strong. Now they are 4th in the college football rankings, beating Georgia and eclipsing Georgia. And I don't want to get into Georgia too much right now because we have our interview with Carlos coming up. We're going to break it all down then, but it's just amazing. Georgia being the most dominant team all year long. I mean, they were the number 1 spot the entire season, and then it only took the last game to basically get kicked out. And Alabama, I think I saw it was the first time, not that the playoffs have been going on for a long, long time, but it was the first time a team jumped from top 6, top 7 into the Final Four of the playoffs. Rounding out the top 10, Penn State, Missouri, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and then, of course, Florida State at 5, and then Alabama, Texas, Washington, and Michigan. My last question before moving on to NFL, Justin, breaking down NFL from Sunday. What do you think about Oregon getting in the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty? Do you think that's kind of for me, that's disrespectful to Oregon? Oregon is going to be opened as massive, massive favorites against Liberty. Liberty had, I think, the easiest schedule in the FBS all year. And like I said, I actually still think personally Oregon is a top, at least top 5 team in the country, probably should even be in the playoffs. So what do you think about the disrespect just the bowl committee in general gave Oregon, giving them the Fiesta Bowl against a pretty weaker Liberty team, all things considered?
I think I think they should have put another team against Oregon. Let's say they put Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. Let's say they put Missouri in the Fiesta Bowl. I think there's other more deserving teams than Liberty that should be playing Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. But for Oregon, I wouldn't say they're disrespected. I mean, losing to Washington twice, including the Pac-12 championship game, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's kind of like if a team in the NFL, wins the tiebreaker and sweeps the divisional opponent and they have the same record, you give it to the team that swept them, that beat them in the divisional, swept them twice and have the same record and same conference losses. I think that part makes sense, but the part that doesn't make sense of the way the college football playoffs is set up is you didn't blow out a team. Florida State blows out Louisiana. I think Florida State is in the college football playoffs and not Alabama for not almost losing to Georgia, but being in a dogfight with Georgia and beating them, knocking off the number 1 ranked team in the country.
Yep. Do you think Florida State, I know there's some rumblings about Florida State potentially boycotting the Orange Bowl, of course, then being in the Orange Bowl with Georgia. What do you think about that? Any chances of them actually going through with that, maybe boycotting playing in the Orange Bowl?
I wouldn't go that far to say that they will, but excuse me, if they don't, then they don't play. They don't play in the Orange Bowl, and I think it would kind of be a mistake for them not to boycott it, but I see why they're doing it.
Before moving on to NFL, any other matchups in particular that you're excited to see? Louisville, USC, that's not happening until the 27th, but that's going to be interesting. We'll get Zach's thoughts on that at some point. Of course, obviously the New Year's games, New Year's 6 games will be very, very good. I know we already touched base on, January 1st, the Fiesta Bowl between Oregon and Liberty, but FSU will play Georgia, like I just said, on December 30th. Penn State, Ole Miss, December 30th. Missouri, Ohio State on the 29th, and then of course the national championship games, the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. Well, not the national championship, but the semifinals between Alabama, Michigan, and then Texas, Washington will be on January 1st.
Yeah, so a game that I'm interested in seeing is Arizona and Oklahoma. That is the Alamo Bowl on December
Mm-hmm.
28th. That's going to be a good game. And Arizona, I believe they've turned their program around, and Oklahoma, they're definitely a top team
Yeah.
in the NCAA.
Yeah, other weird matchups, all things considered, though. I mean, Clemson, Kentucky, December 29th, that could be pretty interesting. But weird matchups, all things considered. Washington's playing LSU, Tennessee, and Iowa. That's going to be a weird matchup as well. West Virginia, North Carolina, that could be a weird matchup. Kansas, UNLV. Just a lot of mismatches and just weird matchups in general, which I know is what makes bowl games exciting. Teams that never really play each other, don't have a lot of tape on each other, do end up facing off, which makes really exciting matchups. But overall, just kind of a weird slate, all things considered, and especially just given how the final playoff matchups and the playoff rankings ended up, taking care of themselves. NFL, let's move on to the NFL, Justin. Week 13 this past Sunday. Already broke down Thursday night football in the past with the Seahawks, Cowboys, obviously. But let's break down all the other games from this past Sunday slate. I'm going to start with you. Closest game, like we always do. What was your closest game this past Sunday?
Closest game this past Sunday was the Lions and the Saints. I knew it was going to be a close game. The Lions, I didn't think they played that great leading into this game, but Jared Goff did throw for 213 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Derek Carr threw for 226 yards, a touchdown, and an interception thrown. For the Saints, played the Lions close. They were down 21-0, and then came all the way back, almost made it a game there. Was 27-21 in the third quarter. Then the Lions, then they came close to winning the game, but the Lions pulled through with a 33-28 victory.
Are you concerned about their defense?
Of the Lions
Had
defense
blew a 21-0 lead. Yeah,
could be a little
I mean,
bit concerning, especially
mhm.
when they're in the playoffs and could be facing a tough challenge. So we'll see with the Lions defense.
Yeah, I mean, this late scare from the Saints, it definitely makes you feel a little less confident about the Lions, though. Their ability to be considered one of the top elite teams in the NFC, especially, after this Sunday matchup we saw against the Eagles and 49ers. But, I'm sure we'll get to that in a second. My closest game, I'm going to go Colts Titans. That special teams and defense making all the difference for the Colts. Special teams helped the Colts score 10 points off Nick Cross block punt, and Grant Stewart's returned 18 yards for a touchdown late in the third quarter as well. The defense for the Colts sacked Will Levis 6 times, despite being outgained 381 to 355. Tennessee held the ball for more than 38 minutes as well. Colts defense and their special teams making all the difference in helping them end up getting this victory over Tennessee, who usually is very, very good at home, very good at Nissan Stadium. Titans offense was playing its best ball of the season, though, but just couldn't make the plays in crunch time. I mean, the Titans' 28 points matched their highest point total of the season. Of course, they had 28 against Atlanta when they played them on the 29th of October. Offense set high standards in totals for first downs, rushing first downs, rushing yards, and time of possession. Like I said, they were all highs this past weekend. 25 first downs, 12 rushing first downs, 177 rushing yards in general. And again, like I said, they had the time of possession over 38 minutes, which for a Titans offense that was struggling, pretty good all things considered. I do want to get your thoughts on this, Justin. I mean, I know a lot of attention is being given to D'Amico Ryans about being the coach of the year for the Texans, but what do you think about Shane Steichen potentially being thrown into consideration for coach of the year?
I think it's rightfully so that Shane Steichen gets thrown in as the coach of the year. Either him or D'Amico Ryans have been turning around teams that were top three picks last year in the Colts and the Texans. So I do think Shane Steichen has done a really good job with the Colts, and even going into the season with the Jonathan Taylor saga and everything else. And now, I mean, the Colts are they might be a playoff team in the AFC. They might get a wild card with the way Steichen is
Absolutely
coaching
could be.
that team, and I think he's turned that team around.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm looking at that now. They're on a win streak.
They
Yeah,
are
I
on a
think
winning
they're on
streak.
a 4-game. I think they have actually with the Eagles and the Broncos losing yesterday, they now have the highest win streak in the league, tied with Dallas at 4. Yeah, wow. Like I said, we said it last week too. The Colts out of nowhere, sneaky 7-5 team. Michael Pittman for the Colts playing absolutely amazing. Sunday, 11 receptions, 105 yards, 4 touchdown. Like I said, their defense looked amazing, and they held a Titans team that they were able to outlast the Titans team that overall looked really, really well. And um, now, of course, they might be out with Derrick Henry might be out now. He played well, but he might be out after exiting the fourth quarter with an injury. But we'll see what happens there. We'll keep you updated on that. But Colts, watch out for the Colts. Might be a sneaky team, and probably a teams might not want to play going down the stretch here, especially one of the first couple rounds of the playoffs. What was your most intriguing storyline of this past weekend,
My
Justin?
most intriguing storyline is the Steelers and the Cardinals. The Cardinals with the upset. The Steelers, I mean, we've been talking about them a lot. Kenny Pickett injured. He will be out this week for an extended period of time with, I believe it was an ankle injury he suffered
Mm-hmm. Yep.
against the Cardinals. Yeah, he has ankle surgery. He will miss 2 to 4 weeks. So this is a big loss for the Steelers, and they might be falling out of the playoff picture in the AFC, especially with the Colts. And well, the Browns lost, but the Colts are kind of sneaking up on the Steelers. I'd say they have a big matchup coming up in Week 15, I believe. Yeah, Week 15 they play, and the
Mm-hmm.
Texans sneaking up, the Broncos as well. Uh, even though the Broncos lost, but there had to be a loser or a tie in that game. But yeah, I think the Steelers are in big trouble. So that's my intriguing storyline. And
I don't
another
know.
thing is, does Mike Tomlin still have a winning season? Still could go 7-10 or 8-9. Who knows?
Well, I mean, I bet he does because you kind of alluded to it already. I mean, their schedule isn't that bad, the Steelers. And Mitch Trubisky could arguably be better than Kenny Pickett. And I think that still is yet to be seen. Kenny Pickett has not been playing good this season at all. Mitch Trubisky on Sunday went 11 for 17, 117 yards. He had a passer rating of 104, while Pickett had less than 90. I mean, I don't think Mitch Trubisky is much better than Kenny Pickett, but I don't think he's much worse either. And of course, defense is still very, very good for the Steelers, like it's always going to be. I think the Steelers might be fine. Looking at their schedule now, the remaining games they have coming up. I mean, you already alluded to the Colts, but then they play the Patriots next weekend, which
That should be a
that
win
pretty much needs to be a win, or needs to be a win. You could even say. And then they say they play the
without
Bengals. Then
Burrow,
after the Colts,
right? And then the
yep,
Seahawks.
yep,
That could be a tough game in Seattle.
and
And
in
then at
Seattle
Baltimore,
too, and then
that could also be a tough game for them.
yep, definitely. So I mean, Baltimore would definitely be a tough game, but especially because they already beat Baltimore once, and I don't see the Steelers beating Baltimore twice. But yeah, I mean, I personally am super excited to see Trubisky play. Very, very excited. So I want to see what he can do, and I'm sure the Steeler fans are super excited to see him start to play because they were not happy with Pickett and how he's been playing lately. My most intriguing storyline, gonna touch base on the Eagles 49ers game a little bit here. I want to know if the 49ers are really that much better than the Eagles, or if the Eagles just played really, really bad on Sunday. Eye test alone, 49ers absolutely demolished the Eagles. Obviously, the final score would also show that the Eagles got demolished, but just looking at the game in general, the Eagles just did not show up on Sunday. They got absolutely manhandled by the 49ers. The Niners scored 6 straight touchdown drives to close this game out. Super convincing fashion. I don't know if they're that much better. Like I said, the Eagles just had that bad of a game. Eagles, of course, now on this rough stretch with KC, Buffalo, San Fran, and now they have Dallas next week. They found ways to win in their 3 of those previous games, but of course on Sunday they just were not able to get it done. Eagles did have clear fatigue on offense, especially. They definitely had clear, very, very big fatigue. I think they played, that KC, Buffalo, and San Fran. I think were all in the span of like 13 days or something ridiculous.
Yeah, it was.
So they definitely showed it. Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
they definitely
fatigue, a lot of
both in
that's why.
defense.
Sorry, a lot of missed tackles there too, and a lot
Yeah.
of fatigue.
Yeah.
And they could have done better. They really had it in the first 2 drives of the game. They could have went up 14-0 in the red zone. And the red zone offense for the Eagles this season, while it's been getting better, it hasn't been exactly the best red zone offense. And
Yep.
coaching is a problem with this team. I think we need to admit it. Coaching is a problem with this team. Fatigue plays a part into it. Injuries play a part into it
Yep.
on the defensive side of the ball. But coaching is a problem with this team, and they got to utilize the run game more. They got to utilize it,
Yeah.
especially against Dallas. They got to play more consistent. Shaq Leonard, the Eagles signed him, who was just released by the Colts 2 weeks ago. That's a good signing for them at linebacker. And
Yeah.
I know the Eagle fan base has been screaming for a linebacker for years, that they needed. So Shaq Leonard, that could be a good signing. Maybe not the best linebacker, but definitely talented from what they've had and all the injuries on that side of the ball.
Oh yeah, no. Signed him on the day after this loss, so they know their needs. That at least that's a good sign for the Eagles. Purdy he continues to play awesome. He's definitely not a fluke anymore. We've said that at length already. I know a lot of people were questioning if he actually is a good quarterback, but he's proved that this year he definitely is a good quarterback, and it's not just system talk. Debo couldn't stop Debo all game, especially couldn't stop McCaffrey all game. McCaffrey, it seemed like he just was a guaranteed 5, 6, maybe even 7 yards, 93 yards and a touchdown on his 17 carries. But like I said, he routinely converted key third downs and just kept the Niners' drives alive the entire game. It seemed like he was just untackable. Eagles had absolutely no response for him. And yeah, like I said, Eagles just got manhandled at home on a rainy Sunday in Philly. But we'll see. Most likely we'll see each other again. I said it last week, Justin, on the show. I actually was fine with the Eagles losing this game because I think the Eagles potentially will end up they probably will see the 49ers again. And I think it's going to be really tough to beat the 49ers twice. So I'm actually kind of okay with it. I know it's kind of a bit of a loser talk, but I didn't want to lose this bad, that's for sure, because this is going to be in their minds if they do face them again come the playoffs.
Yeah, it's a head-scratching
week.
loss the way they lost the game. If they lost by 2 points, it's one thing, but the way they lost, it's a little questionable. Heading into Dallas, they really got to get it together. And I know they're still in first place right now at 10-2. They still have the number 1 seed in the NFC and the best record in the league. But at the same time, they really got to pick it up against the Cowboys, or else if they lose this game, they might be in second place. They might be a wild card team. And for a team that went to the Super Bowl last year, finished 14-3, they could finish less than 14-3. Let's say they finish 13-4, 14-3, but they don't win the division. They should win the division at 14-3, maybe even get a first round bye. But we'll see.
They'll win the division. Well, it really just depends on how the Cowboys do. This game for divisional, not even just conference, who wins the conference, but for who wins the division, this game against the Cowboys is going to be insane. That goes without saying, though. Cowboys have scored 40 plus points on their last 4 home games, though, and the Eagles, of course, go into Dallas this weekend. So, little scared for the Eagles, like you said, Justin. Very well could be the second seed in the NFC after this weekend coming up. Surprise of the week, despite the Eagles getting killed by the 49ers, any other surprise this week that you had?
I'll go Packers over the Chiefs. That was my upset pick of the week, and
that's mine
that
too.
was something else. That was some game by the Packers beating the Chiefs. Very close game, and the Packers, I think they'll be a playoff team in the NFC. I think they might get a wild card spot. Maybe even I don't think they challenge the Lions for the division, but I think they're a wild card team in the NFC.
No, Love has been playing very well the last 4 games. Finished the game 25 for 36, 267 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, but most importantly, made 4 big-time throws and 0 turnover-worthy plays on the game to ultimately lead the Packers a win over the Chiefs in Green Bay at Lambeau on Sunday night. He looked comfortable inside the pocket. He looked comfortable inside the play calling structure of the offense. He generated an adjusted 82.1% completion rate and had 8.6 yards per attempt on straight drop backs. Christian Watson played awesome, 7 receptions, 72 yards for 2 touchdowns. He balled out all game. Did leave early with a hamstring injury. Unfortunately, we'll keep you updated on, the status of him going forward. But yeah, Packers, they started out the game big, started out the game ahead early and never really took their foot off the gas. Scored touchdowns on 3 of their first 4 drives and never trailed, with their defense making 2 big stops in the last 5.5 minutes. Mahomes, pretty average, all things considered. Pacheco balled out for the Chiefs, though. He rushed for 110 yards and a touchdown before, of course, getting ejected for punching Keyshawn Nixon during a scuffle on the game's final series. But yeah, awesome for Green Bay, though. Like you said, Justin, very much in the playoff hunt. After a poor string of games that they had early in the year, I mean, they're playing their best ball. It could absolutely and most likely will lock up a wild card spot. So yeah, this was my surprise of the week too. Jordan Love, I would love to see him continue to play his best ball, and I think he will. And he's going to lead the Packers to the playoffs. He would ever have imagined, especially how they started the year. What is your shootout of the week?
Shootout of the week.
I'll
go with the Colts and Titans. Good overtime game. Good win by the Colts. Gardner Minshew threw for 312 yards and 2 touchdowns. Will Levis kept his team in the game as well. Derrick Henry had 102 rushing yards. Good win for the Colts. Good game played. And I think obviously we've been talking about the Colts here. Steichen could be considered for Coach of the Year, and even without Anthony Richardson going down. Now you have Gardner Minshew, who has been a good backup quarterback for the Colts and definitely could be a starter next year. Who knows?
You could argue whoever wins the AFC South is going to win Coach of the Year at this point.
Possibly.
Well,
maybe not Jacksonville. Maybe not Doug
Jaguar.
Peterson, but Shane Steichen or D'Amico Ryans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whoever has a better. Let me rephrase that. Whoever has a better record between Texas and the Colts will probably win the Coach of the Year.
A lot of former Eagles in that division with the head coaching. Doug Peterson, Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator last year, and D'Amico Ryans played on the Eagles. So a lot of former Eagles in that division.
Yeah, now we just got Shaquille Leonard, ironically, from the
Colts,
Colts,
right?
My shootout of the week: Lions Saints. Lions start out the game dominant, 21 points first quarter. Saints, though, like I said, were able to come back, and Lions had a scare at the end. They had a lead early on, but then their defense, as we've been kind of seeing all year, struggled. They were able to survive a late game comeback against the Saints, and again, like I said, barely survived. Lions dominant on offense, but defense definitely struggles. They made the Saints offense look dangerous for the first time, it seemed, all year. Despite the injury to Derek Carr, the offense for the Saints really played amazing. It seemed like, and that's a lot due to the Lions defense being pretty anemic all game. Kamara rushed for 14. He had 14 rushes for 51 total yards and 2 touchdowns, 6 receptions for 58 yards as well. And then Chris Olave continues to play amazing, 5 receptions for 119 yards. He's making big plays for the Saints, including an ill-advised pass from Jameis Winston that was likely on its way to being intercepted. He was able to catch that ball, kind of skirting disaster there, and helps, keep that drive alive for the Saints. Olave averaged 3.71 yards per route run in this game. And like I said, just making massive plays for the Saints. And Lions, we already talked about it early in the early in this episode, Justin. But Lions, I can't put the Lions as a elite team in the NFC. Not up there with the Eagles, not up there with the 49ers and Cowboys. I really do think after this performance from the Lions this past weekend, with the defense I saw from them, I think it's a three-team race for the elite level in the NFC between the Eagles, 49ers, and Cowboys. I can't put Lions up there until I see more from their defense, unfortunately, and it's gonna haunt them. It's gonna be a big problem going into the playoffs, despite how well they've been playing on offense, despite how well the team has been playing all year. That defense will let them down in the playoffs if they don't figure it out and figure it out fast. What was your snoozer of the week?
We'll go Chargers Patriots 6-0, 2 field goals in the game by the Chargers. I mean, come on, that's definitely just the snoozer of the week for me. And both teams need to fire their coaches. Both teams easily need to fire their coaches. And the Patriots, I know Belichick, great track record, 6 Super Bowl wins, but it's time to move on in New England. And now you got a half-empty stadium. So, I mean, it's they're probably going to move on from Belichick. And then the Chargers should move on from their coach as well, easily.
Yeah, no, this is my snoozer of the week too. Of course it is. It can't not be. Ironically, I had this as my shootout of the week as my prediction on Saturday's show. I was actually predicting this to be a pretty, for some reason, a high-scoring game, which I was way off, obviously. Pat's defense, third time in a row that the Patriots gave up 10 or fewer points and lost. They are the first team to do that since the 1938 Chicago Cardinals. Chicago's Chargers offense looked pretty anemic. Herbert threw for only 212. Keenan Allen came back from a thigh bruise to catch 5 passes for only 58 yards, giving him 100. That was his 100th reception of the year, though. Chargers only 29 rushing yards, and the only scoring they could manage was a pair of 38-yard field goals in the second quarter. Obviously, like I said, by the score, as you would tell by the score, no touchdowns scored in this game, only 2 field goals from the Chargers. And amazingly enough, like I said, third time in a row, the Patriots gave up 10 points or fewer from their defense and still lost, record-setting way back from close to 100 years ago with the Chicago Cardinals. MVP of the game, LA punter J.K. Scott. They relied on Scott tremendously. The Chargers relied on Scott. Punted 8 times, 1 touchback, and helped limit the Patriots to an average starting position on their 13-yard line. In 11 possessions, New England started inside the 13 7 times, 4 of them inside the 9, including 1 at the 2. J.K. Scott, punter for the Chargers, MVP of the game when pretty much no one else was showing up on offense. He was the MVP of this game. Made it super difficult for the Patriots to make any kind of headway on offense and any run on offense because they were starting literally at inside their own 10 on almost every single possession they had this game. So, yeah, Chargers terrible, Patriots terrible. Both coaches, Belichick won't be fired, but Staley definitely should be on the hot seat. Well, he already is on the hot seat, but he should just be fired already. And I don't see why they would even wait till the end of the season at this point. What did we miss? I don't think we touched on the Dolphins. Commanders.
Yeah, that was a blowout win by the Dolphins, winning 45-15. So the Dolphins, not great against teams over 500 still, but definitely a very good win for them as they go into DC and dominate the Commanders. Tua throwing for 280 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Commanders go to 4-9 as Sam Howell does not throw for a touchdown pass, 127 yards and an interception.
I said it on Saturday. This game was going to be a shootout if the Commanders showed up and played like they played a couple times this year, and this game was not it. The only consistent player for the Commanders has been Terry McLaurin, but even he has been struggling of late. Terry McLaurin going through the roughest stretch of his 5-year career. McLaurin doesn't have a 100-yard game all season and is in danger of not even going over 1,000 yards of receiving. So Hal always takes accountability for not getting McLaurin the ball enough. Yes, some of it's on Hal, but it's not on all. It's not all on Hal. Obviously, it's the play calling for the Commanders. It's Rivera. It's just the offensive coordinator, that got fired this year. Just the whole play structure, the whole play calling is just absolutely terrible. And this is one of those games for the Commanders where they just couldn't not get anything going, and Dolphins, ran it down their throat. Devon Achane back, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns. and Tyreek Hill, and of course Tua played amazing for the Dolphins as well. So yeah, blowout game for them. Cardinals Steelers we kind of touched on already. Pickett out for 3 to 4 weeks. Can't wait to see Trubisky come in. I think he's gonna play awesome. Broncos Texans. Did we touched on? Did we? I don't think actually we touched on. We didn't really touch.
We
on
didn't really
Broncos
touch on
Texans
it,
too much.
but that was a good win for the Texans.
Yeah.
Whoever won this game, that would have been a big win for them. And the Texans got it on their home field. The Broncos coming up close, but Russell Wilson threw 3 interceptions in the loss. So not the best day for Russell Wilson, but the Broncos still could be a wild card team in the AFC as well as the Texans.
Yeah, Stroud and Texans offense flourish, but they do suffer that heavy loss, obviously, with Tank Dow and Nico Collins. Well, no, not Nico Collins, Tank Dow, excuse me, out for the season with that fractured fibula. Stroud only tossed 1 touchdown pass, but he did throw for 274 yards on only 16 completions. So big plays from Stroud and the Texans offense, all things considered. Denver's defense still playing at an elite level, though. Held Stroud to 16 for 27 for only 274 yards. Like I said already, Broncos pressured him early and never really looked back, never really took off the pressure all game. Denver allowed Houston 353 total yards. It allowed just 22 points and held the Texans to 4 of 16 on 3rd down. So Denver, like I said, defense is the biggest reason why they've been having the success they've been having. And unfortunately, with this loss, do you think they're pretty much out of playoff consideration, Justin? What do you think of the chance? I think they're at after a loss this weekend, I think their playoff chances went from 50 to 20. It was a massive, massive hit for their playoff considerations.
I still think they have a chance to make it. I still think they could.
Yeah.
Especially with the AFC wild card teams not being the best. Maybe the Steelers fall apart. The Browns have a backup quarterback, and then the Texans, obviously, they just lost to. But yeah, I still think they got a chance.
Yeah. Defense. Last note: held Houston to a mere 3 yards per carry on the ground. If their defense continues to play the way they do, and Russell Wilson has played like he's done the last 3-4 games, I still think Denver has a chance to make it, despite kind of literally odds against them at this point. Falcons, Jets, Desmond Ridder, not the guy.
Tim Boyle, obviously not the guy in New York.
Yeah. My only takeaway from really the Falcons Jets is I think the talk of Aaron Rodgers coming back is pretty much nipped in the butt at this point. They're 4-8 now, Jets on the season. No chance of them making the playoffs. If they're not making the playoffs, there's absolutely no reason for Aaron Rodgers to come back. And so I do think with this loss, they will end up not. The talk of Aaron Rodgers returning, I think, is going to officially be over.
He won't return this season. Next season, he'll come back probably.
It's concerning, though, for the Jets, though, looking in the next season. Talking of which, quarterback play isn't the only issues for their Jets offense. Simeon finished with only 5 for 13 for 66 yards. Doesn't really matter who's under center for the Jets. The offensive issues still have been consistent. Nathaniel Hackett, offensive coordinator for the Jets, of course, he struggled to really make some good scheme receivers open and give his quarterbacks easy completions. The running game, which averaged a mere 2.5 yards per carry on Sunday, has failed to find any consistent growth or any even consistent leverage or momentum all season long. So Aaron Rodgers coming back next season, that's great, but they still need to figure out a lot of things on the offensive side of the ball because quarterback can't do it all, and they're showing that they still have a lot of holes to fill in this offense. And Nathaniel Hackett, despite getting a healthy Aaron Rodgers next year, will have to make a lot of adjustments to get this Jets team back on its winning ways. Panthers Bucks, I don't have anything to really say about this game. Bucks might win their division.
They might. Who knows? Anybody's division except for the Panthers. They were eliminated.
Yeah. We thought it's crazy to think that they might win over the Saints and maybe even the Falcons. But obviously, with the Saints losing this weekend, Buccaneers that much closer to winning the division. Browns Rams. Flacco. I don't think we touched on the Browns Rams either. Flacco, not too bad for his start with the Browns. 23 for 44 with 254 passing yards, 2 touchdowns with only 1 interception. He finished with more passing yards than Thompson Robinson had in his last 2 weeks, and that Deshaun Watson produced in his final 2 starts of the season as well. So Flacco, far from perfect, but was serviceable when needed and was able to produce a win if he had support from other parts of his team. Of course, that didn't happen, and the Rams were able to take away this victory pretty convincingly. But still, some exciting things from Flacco this past week. And like I said, if he gets some support from other parts of the team, namely the defense plays like it should be playing, and he gets some offensive help as well, Browns still might be in this thing because Flacco very well could at least be a game manager for the Browns down this stretch and help them win some games. Did you watch the game, Justin? What were your thoughts on Flacco? How do you think he played this
Not
game
terrible
overall? Any highlights?
Yeah, not terrible for a quarterback just coming in. But the Browns, they have a lot of work to do. I mean, their schedule is. I'm looking at it here. They have the Jaguars off a short week coming into Cleveland. Maybe they could upset them in that game. The Bears. That's a pretty easy win, but the Bears, you never know with them. And then at the Texans, I think that game could be a tough game. The Jets and then the Bengals, two teams without their starting quarterbacks, obviously. So maybe the Browns do get a wild card.
Yeah. What do you think about the Rams, though? Other side of the ball. What do you think about the Rams? How they've been playing lately? Not the best. They haven't played the best teams lately. Obviously beat the Seahawks, beat the Cardinals before the Browns, but they're playing really good lately. Matt Stafford came back from his thumb injury. He's leaving that behind. He went for 22 for 37 on Sunday for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns with no interceptions. And in his last 2 games, he has over 500 yards of passing with 7 touchdowns and only 1 interception. I mean, in the 1 interception he had against the Browns, that snapped a 4-game streak with 1 interception in each of those games. So, yeah, Matt Stafford playing pretty well, all things considered, and look out for the Rams on a 3-game win streak and second in the NFC West right now at 6-6. And it's that. Unfortunately, it's not open. The 49ers will absolutely win that division, of course, but I think 9 games might be what's needed for a wild card spot. And they have the Ravens coming up next weekend, which is going to be hard, obviously. But then they finish with Washington, the Saints, the Giants, and then of course they unfortunately have to play the 49ers. But out of these next 5 games remaining, if they can maybe get 3 wins, they might be in wild card contention. But it's gonna be tight.
They might be in wild card contention, and there's 4 teams that are tied for the 6th and 7th wild card spot, and that is in the NFC, yes, the Vikings, the Packers, the Rams, and the Seahawks are all 6-6, and they're all tied for the wild card spot.
Yeah. I mean, it could happen. Broncos, they need like you just alluded to, they need the Broncos to continue to slide. Both Rams and the Broncos, despite the Broncos losing this past week, and I still do think are on quite the momentum. So they need the Broncos to kind of. I am in the wrong conference. We're talking about this. We're talking about the Rams. But no, you're right. I mean, the Seahawks. I think they have actually been. They've been on the downslide, and the Falcons, of course. Desmond Ridder is not going to be the guy either, and the Vikings have been kind of sliding a little bit too. So, we'll see. Rams though might make the playoffs, and I would love to see it because Stafford's playing really well. New week's resolutions. Justin, what is your new week's resolution?
Eagles got to run the ball more. Eagles got to run the ball and really keep their defense off the field. The defense, that's just what happened. They had a pretty good game plan in the first 2 drives of the game, even going up 6-0. Hit A.J. Brown on the slants. Devontae Smith as well got involved. But they got to start running the ball more, and they got to start mixing the run and the pass together. They really got to start picking up their game, especially at Dallas. I know that they're 10-2 still, but are they going to be a championship team? That's the question I have today after losing that way at home to the 49ers. I believe that's the worst loss at home in the last 15 years. Since 2009, they
Really?
have not lost a game that big.
Wow. Yeah. No. In eye test, and that's the final score. But like I said earlier, the eye test even shows more. They got absolutely manhandled by the 49ers. My New Week's resolution, gonna go to college basketball. Actually, Duke Blue Devils. They need to figure out things fast, or they will continue to drop in the polls. John Shire might squander another year of having a talented roster, but failing to capitalize with that roster. Duke, of course, this past week had a rough week, losing to both Arkansas and Georgia Tech. Against Georgia Tech, they had awful shooting. Um, their shooting woes continued in the 72-68 loss to the Yellow Jackets. The team finished with just 26 for 62 from the field, despite a 20-point performance from their senior guard, Jeremy Roach. Yeah, awful shooting against the Blue Devils. Defense has not looked too great either. Shire has to figure things out fast for this Duke squad. Obviously, with the Blue Devils having massive expectations in college basketball, and could be the second year in a row where they fail to capitalize on those expectations. So something needs to be figured out fast, and this is a bad start to the season, and it really does all fall on Shire, and things need to get figured out quickly. And they're going to find themselves out of the polls soon. Let's move on to our interview with Carlos Medina. Awesome interview. Breakdown mostly just Georgia Bulldogs. Of course, Georgia, as we already touched on at the beginning of the show, Bulldogs, and as we all know, are out of the college football playoffs. Number 1 seed in the AP polls the entire year in college football, but one weekend, one loss against Alabama. They now find themselves at 6, outside looking in, I should say. We'll play FSU, of course, in the Orange Bowl, and we'll preview that, kind of talk about his thoughts, talk about Carlos's thoughts on the Bulldogs being out of the playoffs, and just kind of what it means for next year, and just overall kind of talk about the Orange Bowl and the big matchup they have coming up against FSU. So without further ado, let's head to Atlanta and talk to Carlos. Okay, we now head to Atlanta and bring back on recurring guest Carlos Medina from 106.3 extra 106.3 The Fan, and then 106.3 FM, and then 680 The Fan, in Georgia.
It's a mouthful, Jared. Trust me. Like I said, it's a whole lot. Yeah.
We had to get you back on again to talk. Last time we had you on, I think it was about maybe 2 months ago. We talked about Georgia sports in general, Atlanta sports in general, more the pro focus. Didn't really touch on a whole lot of Bulldogs at that time, but of course, Rollings came out this Sunday, college football playoffs. Georgia outside looking in now after being the number 1 seed all year. Crazy stuff. How to get your reactions from this, get the fans' reactions, what everyone is saying in Atlanta, all the Bulldog fans that live out there. What is this like? I mean, out of all of the snubs, there were a lot of snubs this year. Oregon, I think, is better than Washington. FSU, we all know what people are clamoring about. But in your, as trying to be as unbiased as possible, is this the biggest snub out of all the teams that are being left out of this playoffs?
I think if we're being realistic, obviously the Florida State fans are going to say what they're going to say, but because of their injuries and what they look like over the past couple of weeks, you would question whether or not they have a functional college football playoff level offense. And I think that's completely legitimate. I think the one thing that Georgia fans have been resolute in pointing out is that they had their chance on the field. They made mistakes. It didn't work out. Yet, for a team that outside of 1 week where Ohio State was number 1 when the playoff rankings were out, they were number 1 in the polls and they were number 1 in the playoff rankings, to drop to 6th was pretty surprising given the history of what's gone on. But again, you had your chance on the field, and after 2 national championships, it's not like you have a tremendous amount of Georgia fans that are crying foul. It's more of you had your opportunity and it didn't work out.
What was the biggest downfall, do you think, in the Alabama game? when they played this past weekend?
A couple different things. Losing Amarius Mims over at right tackle, who they had a similar situation happen during the year, and they were able to get through it with the level of competition that they were playing. He had gone down with a high ankle sprain. They got by without him. He's definitely a top 15, top 20 type of talent in the upcoming NFL draft. And so when he went down early in that game, there looked to be kind of a resolution of, all right, let's kind of bring it in a little bit. Let's not expose the Georgia tackles, the young tackles, to as much of the Alabama pass rush. And I think they went a little bit conservative. And so when you do have a fumble, obviously in your red zone, which ends up resulting in a field goal, and you miss a field goal based off of basically backing up for 3 consecutive plays, that's the game. That's what it comes down to. Every time they've matched up with Alabama, it's come down to a handful of plays, and Georgia recently has made more of them. Alabama made them this time around.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. I mean, every single year pretty much with the college football playoffs, they can't be perfect. Teams that should be making it have to be left out. But it does still seem interesting and confusing to me, because I still would say Georgia probably is one of the top 4 teams in the country, despite losing to Alabama this past weekend. And, I know it's not that easy. You have to, reward, wins on the field. Texas obviously, did deserve it, and Alabama did beat Georgia, of course, and Washington going undefeated, and then Michigan obviously being dominant as well. It's just, it does seem like this was the, I know next year we are going to the 12-team playoff structure, but it did seem like this year more than ever, it would have been a great year to have it, because as we just kind of talked about, there's a lot of snubs this year.
Well, if I want to be very petty about this, and trust me, I'll put the petty on. I even wore the sweatshirt, the Georgia sweatshirt for today. The wife is a Georgia grad. You can start off by saying, hold on, Texas lost to OU, and OU didn't sniff the playoffs. They were not that kind of a team over in the Big 12. You can talk about who's the only team in the top 7 who had a home loss by double digits. That's Alabama. Yep. Okay. Like we can go through this and start pointing out resumes and saying you lost a neutral site game by 3 points against Alabama. If you're going to make the argument that Alabama can be in, well, then I think you can make that argument that Georgia should be in based on resumes alone. It's just your loss. If we're comparing, apples to apples, the Alabama loss in Tuscaloosa is significantly worse than a loss for Georgia to Alabama on a neutral site.
Yeah, I personally I'm very surprised that Texas ended up making it. Both teams, of course, with only one loss, and like you said, Georgia's loss was much less less bad than, for lack of better words, than Texas's loss, because, like you said, it was the neutral field and against an Alabama team that has been playing probably one of the best in all of the country over these past 3-4 weeks in the season. What do you think with the Orange Bowl coming up? It's kind of an interesting matchup, right? Because we know we just talked about Georgia at length. They have something to prove. Florida State also obviously has a lot to prove with, them having a massive snub. So what do you think about the Orange Bowl coming up? And do you think there's any possibility that FSU might try to boycott the Orange Bowl?
No, and here's the reason why. 4 million reasons. When you are a playoff team, you get $6 million. When you're a New Year's Six team, you get $4 million. So the ACC is not turning away, nor is Florida State going to turn away a $4 million paycheck to go with the rest of the money that goes along with these things. When Alabama gets in and they're a playoff team and it's $6 million, and Georgia's also a New Year's Six team, that's $10 million. Those are going to be in those coffers. So there's no chance of any that kind of silliness. I will point out, Georgia opened as a 14-point favorite for this game. So if you want to tell me that FSU deserves an opportunity, I'm going to just tell you that they probably would have been a 14, 15, 16-point dog to Michigan or to any of the rest of these teams. And so that's part of the reason. This entire committee, their job is to make good television, and it hasn't always worked out. But look what's going on. You're going to have Seattle with Washington. You're going to have the Midwest with Michigan. You're going to have the South with Alabama, and you're going to have Texas with Texas. They finally have it to where they envisioned back in 2014. They have regional matchups that's going to keep the entirety of the country interested. And so to get it now, that's what they were looking to deliver, and that's what they delivered this time around.
Yeah, I know we talked about it in the intro of this show too. I think TCU has a bad taste in their mouth When they lost to Georgia in the national championship, they got blown away by Georgia, and I think they were afraid that they might see the same thing from FSU. So that might have been a lot of the reason why they kept Florida State out, because they didn't want the same they didn't want a potential same matchup they had against Georgia when they got blown away by Georgia. My question, I mean, you mentioned it, 2014, the playoffs were created basically. And my question for you is, they had to have seen this coming. They had to have seen 4 teams essentially not being enough. Why do you think they only made it 4 teams? I mean, for just the length of the playoffs, I mean, these are obviously young kids. They can't endure too much physical, they can't endure too much physical. So what do you think is the reason they only allowed 4 teams to begin with?
Well, it was always going to be Bunny. And that's what was going to drive all of this. I still remember when the playoffs came into effect. I was at SEC Media Days, and it was a huge deal. All right, first year of the playoffs, this is what's going to happen, and it was such a step forward from the old BCS system, where we would just have a computer ranking, and here are the top 2 teams, and now they're going to play. That was a step forward from what we had even before, where when we had, okay, here are all the bowl matchups where Pac-10 champion is going to head over to the Rose Bowl, and the Big Ten champion is going to go over to the Rose Bowl. And if one of them are competing for a national championship, well, they're not going to play any other ranked team. They're going to play who they're going to play. So it's been this gradual move to increase where we're at. And at 4, what's been very fortunate for this committee until this season is that it's always worked out. We've always had 2 teams that get in, and we have to go search around for, okay, who's number 3, who's number 4. And that's typically why we've only had, maybe 2 of these matchups, a Rose Bowl between Georgia and Oklahoma, and then the Georgia-Ohio State game last year, where they've been competitive. Most of the semifinal matchups are not. And so this just happened to be the one weird year where you had this many Power 5 teams that had a legitimate argument to be in this entire playoff.
What do you think of the dynamic next year with 12 teams instead of 4 teams? So would that benefit Georgia? Would that benefit FSU or some of these other programs that didn't get into the college football playoffs? What do you think of that?
First off, I think it sucks. The magic of college football is that when I'm sitting over next to my in-laws, and my brother-in-law is a Georgia Tech grad, my other brother-in-law is an Auburn grad, and again, my wife is a Georgia grad. It's hilarious in November when Auburn takes that second loss or the third, and we go, well, your season's done. Enjoy going to Mobile. That's the joke. The problem now is that, yes, we are going to have an expanded playoff, and that's going to be great. And most of these teams can pretty much write their name down. They're going to be in a top 12 playoff. But the first loss doesn't get you out of there. The second loss perhaps doesn't even get you out of there. In fact, you're going to have teams that are going to be 9-3 and saying, hey, we're going to the playoffs. And that takes away from the integrity of the regular season that we've grown up being used to.
Yeah, no. So it sounds like you're one of those people that are not, obviously you're not for it. You just said it, but it sounds like it's because of the wins and the losses might mean less throughout the season. Then you're kind of in that camp.
I could have gotten away with 6 teams. And the way I looked at it was the top 2 get a bye, and then here are the other 4 they're going to play. But a lot of this just comes right down to, this was an unfair system in regards that the group of 5 only got 1 chance at this with Cincinnati over this decade, and that was it. And so if you want to tell me about how you're not able to get access to potential playoff money, they had legislation and they had basically cases going through court that were going to end with the monopoly of the Power 5 going away. So that's why we expanded. That's the only reason we've expanded, is so now we can say to Liberty or to Cincinnati or to Tulane, hey, you got a legitimate shot at this thing now.
Yeah, no, and I think I still think it would be tough with 3 losses. It could definitely happen though, for sure, especially if it's a big enough of a name, SEC school or Big Ten school. But as it stands right now, if we did have a 12-team playoff, Missouri would play Oregon, and then that winner would play Michigan. Liberty would play Florida State, actually, and then they would go on to play Alabama. Ole Miss against Georgia, that would play Texas. They would play Texas, winner of that game, and then Penn State, Ohio State, then of course that winner playing Washington. So, yeah, I've been hearing it both sides, Carlos. I've been hearing teams people love it, and then people don't like it because again it takes away the validity. It takes away the validity of the losses and wins and how important they are. Do you think the bigger schools like yourself, someone that covers Georgia, probably are more against it, the 12-team playoff restructuring, just because you are usually one of the most dominant teams, and it kind of makes it a little bit unfair for the teams that can go, 12-1 or even 13-0, consistently year in and year out?
Well, if you look at what Kirby Smart has done since he, really when they arrived on the scene in 2017, first year in 2016, got the system built. By 2017, they're in the playoffs. And since 2017, they always sit in the top 6. You've got 1 year where they've been at it. Every single year, they're in the top 6, if not in the playoffs. So I don't think you question whether or not you are going to be a playoff team. I think you start questioning things similar to what you just brought up. If you're playing Ole Miss, you just played Ole Miss a month ago. We're starting to now have these situations where you'll play a team 2 times, maybe 3 if something weird happens. And now it just starts to take away from some of the fun that is the playoff, where you play teams that you typically don't see. When you have a matchup between Alabama and Michigan like you're going to get, Alabama's going to travel for that because that's the Rose Bowl. As many things that Alabama fans have gotten to do over the last 15 years, a Rose Bowl is not one of them. They're going to turn out for that. And so you get those opportunities when you have this sort of system. I just think that's part of what we're going to have to sacrifice. It'll be fun to have 12, but we are going to be sacrificing a portion of the regular season to get to that fun.
Well, it's like you alluded to too, and it's a good point. I mean, it's going to be a lot more predictable with a 12-team playoff. I mean, there's the top 10 are pretty much, you don't know exactly the order of the top 10, but the top 10 every single year mostly will be decided and will be pretty much known going into the season. It's going to be maybe those 11th and 12th seeds that might be a little bit more of a wild card, so to speak. But yeah, it's a good point you made. It's going to be a lot more predictable. What's your overall thoughts? I know you kind of already touched base on it a little bit, but the Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, what's your overall thoughts just on the matchups they have currently as they stand? Do you think they're going to be pretty good matchups? And then particularly the national championship, like what's your prediction on who ends up going on and maybe even winning the whole thing?
Yeah, I love that we don't have a mystery guest here. That's what's happened in recent years where, several years ago, it was a Washington team that found their way over to Atlanta and they ran into the buzzsaw that was Alabama. You had that a few years ago with Michigan State where they didn't even scratch against Alabama. It just wasn't going to work out. Obviously, you had TCU as the mystery guest last year, which good for you beating Michigan. Then it was 50-some points in the final against Georgia. These 4, there's no mystery guest here. There's no this team just got hot or they're an interesting story or they're a quarterback who put it together. Everybody's good. And so to watch, like I said, I love looking at lines and what Vegas looks at these games. I think the over-under is 64.5 between Texas and Washington and a 4.5 point spread. That's going to be a fun game. Like that's going to be up and down the field. I'm not saying 2001 Holiday Bowl where that was Texas and Washington. It was 47-43. But I expect that there'll be a ton of points. And the same thing goes, excuse me, we're going to find out about J.J. McCarthy because for the past month, it's been pretty mediocre play for Michigan. And so show me what you're going to do against one of the better defenses, one of the bigger defenses in the country. And let's see if that terror that is Alabama, that when they get to this point in the year, they just know what to do. Let's see if they can get that done against Michigan. I think it's going to be fascinating. And to me, I would be surprised to see another matchup between Texas and Alabama in a final.
No, me neither. I like I said, I don't think I think Washington's very good. I don't think they're a 2 seed, to be completely honest. So I can easily see Texas beating Washington. And then as much as you don't want to hear this, I could absolutely see Alabama beating Michigan because it probably will be the best defense McCarthy and Michigan Wolverines they saw all year. So I think they absolutely could have a potential.
And Jared, here's Michigan. The thing, and this is we always point about at the SEC. Like I had a friend of mine who was at the Orange Bowl last time around when it was Georgia and Michigan, and he was paying attention to a guy in front of him who was on his phone. Older gentleman had big text on it, and he's telling his friend, they just came out of the tunnel. They're much bigger than we are. Like you just see the SEC size. It just sticks out to you, when you start kind of doing the measurables and going like, oh my God, look how big these guys are. If there's one team that can physically match up against Georgia, it's Alabama. And the one team that matches up physically with Alabama is Georgia. They are going to walk onto that field against Michigan and be bigger, faster, stronger. Now, is that going to mean a win? we'll see. But that's one of the things that when you talk about, hey, Michigan played Penn State, it's a really good defense. Hey, Ohio State's a really good defense. They're different here. they're just different here in the SEC.
Yeah, no, you hear it all the time. The joke, the top 4 teams in the SEC, Georgia, consistently, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU. It's basically the NFL 7th conference. You can argue, you can joke, but what do you think about overall just the realignment next year about the conferences, not just the playoff structure, but just the realignment and the teams leaving, the teams that are leaving, and then the formation, Pac-12 going away, and ACC might be on its way being dismantled too. What are your overall thoughts on, us getting closer and closer to that 2 dominant conference play in college football?
I have long said this for the better part of a decade. I've referred to it as Super D1. I believe that we're going to be moving to a system where you're going to have whatever the remnants of the Power 5 are going to move even out of the purview of the NCAA and do their own thing. And that's where I believe it's going. And so realignment, as much fun as it's going to be to have Texas and Oklahoma entering into the SEC, this is all going one direction in my mind of here's the Big Ten, how massive they're going to be in the SEC, and everybody else has to figure it out. And so when you have, and I think we've seen this to a certain extent with Michigan. Michigan looked at this cheating scandal and they looked at the NCAA and just said, what are y'all going to do about it? You're not doing anything about it. What do you got, bowl ban us, or you going to take us off TV? Go away, punks. And that's where it is. The NCAA is now just that. It's that organization that gets to run a college basketball tournament and gets to tell smaller D1 programs what they can and can't do, but they have no way to police what's coming right now as far as these big conferences in college football.
Well, money drives it. That's why, and they can only do so much about it because money at the end of the day is going to drive everything and make all the decisions for the most part. It does suck though, because you mentioned a good point. You mentioned a point yourself too. It's all these smaller schools are going to be pretty much screwed coming up here. The bigger schools will be fine. They're going to find their place in one of these 2 big conferences. But 5, 6, 7 years down the line, it's going to be these smaller schools going to have to really be scrapping.
Well, they'll still be
stay alive.
They'll still be the typical. Hey, I went there. I played my 4 or 5 years. I got my education. I went to school for free. That's where you're going to do that. You will be basically playing semi-pro football when you join these other big conferences where NIL is going to be where it's going to be, and that's how guys are going to get compensated.
Yep. Yeah. It's going to be the 2 main ones, and then everyone else pretty much for the most part. Well, Carlos, this has been awesome. I do want to get your final thoughts. So I know you mentioned you think Texas and Alabama then might be the national championship. Then who do you think might come out of that victory, the rematch between Alabama and Texas this year?
If they can keep him upright, I think Texas is looking at their revenge from back in 2009, where they end up losing your quarterback. He goes down and suddenly it's all right. What kind of a game we're going to have? If Quinn Ewers stays upright the way they're playing offense, and Oklahoma State was, like I said, it was fun to watch. You're going to go up and down the field on them. But if they're performing at that level, and remember the championship game is in Houston, so you're going to have an extremely strong Texas crowd there. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch to see if they can get it done. And again, I don't know if there's right now a better play caller in all of football than Steve Sarkisian in college football.
Well, Carlos, this has been awesome. Can't thank you enough for coming on, giving us your expertise on Georgia. We'll see how they come back next year, but overall, regardless, still really excited to see the last year of the 4-team college football playoffs, and we'll have to be in touch and have you on again sometime soon. Okay?
Yep, just let me know, guys.
All right, Justin, let's finish up with our intakes and outtakes of the week.
My intake of the week is Stephen A. Smith saying that TCU was the big reason that FSU did not make it to the college football playoffs. The committee didn't want to get embarrassed by FSU being in there without the quarterback, without Jordan Travis going down for the season with the injury. And for TCU, he said they didn't want TCU in, or they didn't want FSU in because TCU got blown out by Georgia last year's national championship game.
Yeah, no, it's true though. I didn't even think about it until he said it, but no, it's true. The committee might have learned some lessons from last year, and unfortunately for FSU, they were on the wrong side of that lesson, and unfortunately are not at the 5th seed outside looking in. Just talked with Carlos, of course, playing Georgia in the Orange Bowl coming up in about 2 weeks. My take of the week, Yahoo Sports NBA rookie rankings has Chet Holmgren taking over Wemby for Rookie of the Year, top spot. Not a knock on Wemby, but Chet has been playing better. Chet, 17.6 points per game, 8 rebounds a game, 10.5 assists per game, and over 2 blocks a game too, and averaging 30 minutes as well. Both rookies are putting up incredible numbers, but Holmgren has shot the ball more consistently, 40% from the three-point range and 53% from the field. For added context too, Wembanyama is just shooting 27% from three and 43.7% from the field. Holmgren is second in three-point field goals made for the rookie class and leads all rookies with average minutes played as well. He's an obvious key part to the Thunder's rebuild. That was Gilgeous Alexander. He and him are, the two front runners that are leading this rebuild for the Thunder. As much as Wembanyama might be changing the game for players over 7 feet tall, Holmgren is also carving his own path and making a name for himself. The last point, he became the first rookie in Thunder history to record a multiple 30-point games in the first month of his career. Of course, Holmgren, as we all know, did miss all of last year with that bad foot injury he suffered before the season even started. But so happy to see him back, and he's killing it for the Thunder. Like I said, leading this rebuild, and according to Yahoo Sports, and as I agree with as well, currently the front runner for Rookie of the Year early into this NBA season. And I want to see if he can keep it up. And if he does, apparently he has not apparently, I agree. He has a very, very good chance of winning the award and being the best rookie of this season.
My outtake of the week is in the Eagles and the 49ers game. I thought that the rain would play a factor. It did not. And another thing, Brock Purdy is not just a game manager. He is he could be a top 10 quarterback in this league with the Niners and the roster that they had. He had 318 yards and 4 passing touchdowns yesterday in the game. So Brock Purdy is more than just a game manager. My outtake is that Brock Purdy is a game manager. He is not a game manager for the 49ers. And another thing, Big Dom, shout out to him getting ejected from the game. The security guard there getting in a fight with Dre Greenlaw, who was also ejected from the game. We didn't touch on that, but a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah. I didn't. I mean, I'm sure no one even did. And even Eagles fans, I had no idea who that was when he got ejected. But
yeah, well, he was pretty popular in Philly, but now he's now everybody knows who he is outside of Philly too.
Really? Did you know who he was?
I knew who he was as the security guard. I mean, a lot of people talked about him, and they put shirts, Big Dom shirts out for the Eagles Autism Foundation, but now he's famous.
I think I've seen, as an Eagles fan, I think I have seen him on the sidelines before, but I never really made his face looked familiar, but I of course never really knew who he was out of all the hundreds of people that are on that sideline, all the staff that's on that sideline. My outtake, finishing us off, Feinbaum said that he liked Caleb Williams sitting out of the bowl game against Louisville coming up in 2 weeks here. I don't like it. I mean, no one likes it. No one ever likes when the stars sit out. Caleb Williams making over $1 million in NIL money this year. Bowl games are much better when the stars play, and slight chance he would even get injured in the game. I don't think they should be lauded for sitting out. I think they should be lauded. I think they should be lauded for sitting out. I'm sorry, not applauded for missing. And yeah, Caleb Williams, I definitely think he should play. Not that it would really matter for USC, because I think Louisville will end up beating USC, especially with Caleb Williams sitting out with how bad their defense is. But yeah, I just think he's a millionaire with his NIL money. Better when stars play. Better product when stars play. I don't think Feinbaum should be applauding Caleb Williams for sitting out. Good show, Justin. We'll be back on Thursday. Working out the guests still, but we're gonna really break down all the other college football games that happened, all the other championship games that happened this past weekend. Obviously, touch base on the playoff rankings that came out, but we'll actually get into the games a little bit, talk a lot more about the actual bowl games coming up too. It's just our reactions to, the matchups that we have coming up, the dates that they are, and just overall a lot of college football talk, and maybe whatever else happens in the meantime as well. But until then, keep on traveling, and we'll see you all on Thursday.